Get scrimmage of the spring, and we dive deeper into the offensive line one more time right here on this episode of Gators Breakdown.
Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
There we go. The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC, coming at you right here. Billy Napier just spoke to the media after the Gators' second scrimmage of the spring, and we get to hear from Darnell Stapleton, offensive line coach, and Richie Leonard along the offensive line as well. They spoke to the media earlier this week, so we'll get a little bit more offensive line talk. We've talked a lot about the offensive line this spring, so we'll do it one more time in depth. Hey, look, second scrimmage is a week before the orange and blue game, so we only got a week of spring practice left, a week to hear from all these assistant coaches. The only time we get to hear from them and these players too. So I believe Billy Gonzalez will be up on Saturday. So we get to hear from Billy Gonzalez and him being back in Gainesville. So we get to hear his thoughts straight from him. We've got to ask some players. We've got to ask some coaches about Billy G returning. But now we'll get to talk to him and hopefully some more receivers as well. Ricky Pearsall spoke to the media earlier. I'll include what he had to say as we take a big dive into the wide receivers on the next episode of Gators Breakdown. But hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We'll get into a little bit of what Billy Napier had to say after this second scrimmage for the Gators. And be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Subscribe if you haven't done so yet. What you waiting on? What you waiting on? Those likes and subscribes go a long way. And also, link is in the description to join Gators Breakdown Plus. A lot of new members lately taking advantage of that Discord server, keeping the conversation going there with all the recruiting chatter. And of course, supposed to be a big recruiting day for the Gators. I mean, Billy Napier spoke to it. The reason this game is on a Thursday night is to avoid all the other spring games on a Saturday and get the recruits on campus on Thursday. So all of that conversation going on the Gators Breakdown Plus Discord. You get access to that Discord by joining Gators Breakdown Plus with a link in the description. So, all right, let's get to Billy Napier. And look, he felt a little bit better about this scrimmage. Quote, mixed bag. It was, quote, less ugly than the first scrimmage. And you would expect the team to be getting better heading into this second scrimmage a week before the spring game. You would hope it's less ugly than the first one. But he says, right now they're just throwing a whole lot of combinations out there. And without some players, have some injuries, especially along the offensive line. You'll hear him get into that a bit too. But this one was more of a true game compared to the first one. The first scrimmage, a lot of situational football, down and distance, red zone, all that, just working on situations, not necessarily time quarters and all that. He said this scrimmage was more of, all right, if the defense gets a 3 and out, they come off the field and, we play it like a game. So more of a true game for this second scrimmage. And there we go. We'll set it up with there. And here's some more of Billy Napier's thoughts on the second scrimmage.
I do think that the communication on defense was much better today. I do think that we've made progress on that side of the ball from a communication standpoint. I felt like that was impressive today. Xavier Henderson had an exceptional day, made a ton of plays. Had a ton of production. The ball went his way, and he made some really good plays today. Few things to manage from a turnover standpoint, but overall, a lot of growth. I thought we were tougher, we were more physical, we tackled better, and really good situational football. A lot of things we're going to be able to teach off of. I thought Montrell and Trevor in particular had some really good runs today. For the most part, Xavier, I thought, every time I turned around, he was making a play. I do think Andy Jean flashed a little bit today. He made a handful of plays that I thought, he's starting to look more comfortable. A lot to learn there, but had some opportunities, and when given opportunities, he made some plays.
There we go. Good to hear some wide receivers there. Xavier Henderson. Kind of wondering, would some of these veteran receivers, not necessarily him, but some of these veteran receivers maybe get passed up. We hear a lot of Andy Jean, which Billy Napier just named, and Aiden Mazel. We're hearing a lot about these freshman receivers. And maybe it is somebody else who steps up. Ricky Pearsall, he's going to be the number one. He's going to be the leader. But Florida does need some other guys to come along in this wide receiver group. Xavier Henderson did some good things last year. I know maybe going back and looking at it, maybe the receiver used too much in the screen game and not making enough happen. But there were also plenty of times where he made some guys miss and would get some necessary yardage to convert the yardage for a first down. I'm not sure how he fits in, how much this offense changes, going back and maybe scrapping some things from last year, getting Ricky more involved in the screen game and, the quick twitch game from the wide receivers, So, it's eager to see who else is going to step up because I think we're all looking forward to seeing what these freshmen can do just because the guys who have been here, they can elevate their game. If they're not going to elevate their game, then there's some freshmen that's probably going to push them. Aiden Mazel and Andy Jean and Eugene Wilson coming in the fall. You hope those guys push. You'll hear in just a second. The competition on this team is a bit better across the board. Well, okay. You hope it plays out in receiver as well. So maybe it makes an Xavier Henderson better, a Caleb Douglas better. Caleb Douglas had a big catch in the scrimmage tonight as well. So Henderson, Douglas, and you hope a Marcus Burke, and you hope some other guys who have been around. If we're hearing, hey, Mazel's doing good, Gene's doing good, it pushes these guys to do better as well. So not absolutely not giving up any type of hope, not giving in too much of it being Ricky Pearsall and then the freshman. No, I think some of these other guys are going to step up as well. Where we'll hear their name called when you start talking about receivers. And no surprise, once again, you're hearing Montrell Johnson, you're hearing Trevor Etienne. Those guys have been on the tear all springs, and it's still the explosive runs are still there, and absolutely love hearing it. And it's but this was a good scrimmage for the defense as well. So Napier's pointing out some offensive players there, and many times they're the easier ones to do it. And but Napier was high on the defense this scrimmage as well. He said they brought plenty of pressures, communication. That's probably the thing we want to hear the most. And I'm not even sure we heard that much. But for Billy Napier to come out and say, hey, the communication was better on defense, and look, they probably struggled a bit more because he also mentioned tackling, that the tackling was much better on defense. And I think maybe some communication, some tackling were some of the issues in the first scrimmage, but it wasn't long after that I was hearing, all right, maybe they had their best defense, their best practice after the first scrimmage. You take that, you take those learning experiences and you hope that you grow with them. But this defense has been coming along pretty good in the last week or so since that first scrimmage. So as he said, pressures, a lot of tackles for losses, the communication much better, and you expect them to get used to Austin Armstrong, as the spring goes along. So good, but you still you got to take checks and balances. You got to take the good with the bad. If you're hearing big runs from these running backs all spring long, well, we know these guys can do that. I won't necessarily call that a mark against the defense. They did that against some good defenses last year. So if they're doing it this spring too, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, that means the defenses can't tackle, or that means the defense isn't ready yet. That doesn't mean that. And that's what spring football is going to be. So you got to take the good with the bad. But this defense really coming along up front, especially these Napier did go into some of the players missing this second scrimmage, and it's mostly along the offensive line. We'll get into that in just a second. But he's saying that this is where the defense has been able to take advantage. The defensive front should be taking advantage, and they are taking advantage of some injuries up front. So very strong presence up front on the defensive line for the Gators. Cam Jackson, Noah Banks, those transfers are paying dividends for the Gators right now. And Chris McClellan is coming along very nicely. We had an episode not long ago with Sean Spencer and McClellan talking about themselves and how you're looking for that year one to year two jump for Chris McClellan. It sounds like it's happening. All right, practice by practice, rep by rep. He's going to be one of the main cogs, if not the main cog, there in the middle for this Gator defense. So I think you're going to be able to count on Chris McClellan to make that freshman to sophomore jump if spring is any indication. But there we go. There's some standouts from this second scrimmage. As you heard Billy Napier say, Xavier Henderson. There's running backs as well, and I mean, it's you're going to hear names probably filtering out in the next day or so. But of course, I think the defensive line, you probably start there for the defense, and with some offensive linemen missing this scrimmage, you're going to hear a bit more as well. And Devin Moore, very still limited. Jalen Kimber getting reps opposite Jason Marshall in the secondary too. Look, this is going to be a bunch of combinations. Spring, if guys are banged up, you're going to keep them limited. You're not going to rush them and throw them out there and maybe re-aggravate an injury or make an injury worse or something like that. So you're going to get a bunch of different combinations. This is what's happening up front right now for the Gators on this offensive line. And we'll hear even more about it in just a second. But the offensive line's got to go with some different combinations because of the injuries they're dealing with. There's some there's some depth there for the Gators to play along with. But at the same time, they're going to try and get the best five. So Billy Napier's looking for. All right, let's go some quarterback talk. And Napier on if Mert has separated himself, now he would evaluate the quarterback competition.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know that we're ready to define that, in the public, if that makes sense. But what I would say is that Graham Mertz has been impressive to watch. Just his maturity, his ability to learn a new system in a very quick manner. And the most important thing here is that he has forced the other players to rise to the occasion. Jack Miller has really made drastic improvement. I haven't watched Jack feel like, he's out basically the entire season, and then we throw him to the Wolves in the bowl game, but he has really impressed me with his response to the competition. And then Max obviously is a young player who flashes and does a lot of things well, is still learning and can be more consistent. So, we don't play a game anytime soon, right? And I think one thing that competition has done for both players is made them be on top of their game. So I like that variable. We're going to try to keep that variable where it's at.
Out of the spring game, though, with maybe a defined guy, maybe behind closed doors, not publicly, that the team kind of rally around a little bit?
No, I don't. I think that they're rallying around both guys because both guys have proven day in, day out that they can be effective.
Well, I don't want to make too much of Napier saying both guys, which means Miller and Mertz. So, but he did say with, Max Brown got to be a little more consistent, kind of hearing the same things there. I know a hot topic of Max Brown and where he fits in this quarterback battle. From everything I can gather, still third behind these two in through the first two scrimmages and through spring practice. Right now, I know there's a lot of excitement for him, but maybe a little more consistency to come along as well. You'll see the highlights and you'll see the good. And I think there's some good there, and maybe some, when it's good, it's really good. But maybe the consistency is what's lacking with Max Brown. Look, that's kind of to be expected maybe at this moment. The youngest out of the three, Mertz a lot of experience under his belt. But him coming in, and look, that's another thing I was at least looking for with this. And one of the reasons you go get another transfer quarterback is you need competition in this room. Not only you need the depth, of course, absolutely you do, but you need the competition too. You couldn't just go get anybody. And at least you do bring in a guy who knows the routine, knows the game, and can come in at least from that regard. And we'll see what Graham Mertz turns into. But Billy Napier definitely not ready to at least publicly name and get into a starting. Look, I asked him about that Monday night when he was here in Clay County for that. Maybe a timeline for naming a starter. But as you said, you keep the competition going. They're going to keep that variable going right now, and the competition is making all three of these guys better. And it does sound like from multiple angles. Napier there, From everything I can gather, it is Mertz and Miller right now. Right now, that doesn't mean the consistency for Max Brown can't get better the more reps he gets, and we see where that goes. But for now, it does seem like Graham Mertz, Jack Miller. Mertz did throw a pick in the second scrimmage, I believe, to Jason Marshall there. So, but he did get the start with the ones first. Miller got some first team reps as well, I believe. Max Brown running with the third team. So that's how the second scrimmage was going there for the Gators, and that's kind of where it stands right now with the quarterback situation and Billy Napier. And look, it's not expecting, maybe after the spring game we get something. I wouldn't think so. Napier kind of probably going to keep that in his back pocket a bit. So he's, the players responding to Mertz and Miller, but probably keeping that. Do you go into the Utah game, making them wonder who the quarterback is? Do you keep that in your back pocket just a bit? That'd be a storyline worth watching there. We'll see, maybe what you guys hear, what we hear, maybe behind the scenes, and see if it's Mertz. It's just kind of not, hasn't been announced, or if this is going to still be a competition heading into fall, heading into the first game. All right, let's keep it going right here, and we'll transition to the offensive line with Billy Napier, as he was asked about the offensive line in the press conference this evening as well, and that'll transition us to Darnell Stapleton and Richie Leonard as well. But first, we'll hear from Billy Napier and this offensive line.
The new players have affected our team. They've improved our depth, and we are without Jalen Farmer, Cameron Waits. So I think that young players, Najee Harris has become a factor. Been really impressed with Richie Leonard's growth. And then obviously Kingsley and Austin, our veteran players. And then the other tackles, I think Keontae and Damian have done a nice job, right? So Slaughter has stepped up, right? So I think that group is, we got a chance to have a good unit. We just got to put 5 out there, and we practice about 15 guys every day. So a lot of combinations, a lot of contingency plans. So that group, and one thing I would say about that group is they're going against a much improved front, right? Taller, longer. Fundamentally, defensive line is much improved. The edge players, there's a lot of new personnel on the defense. That's forced the offensive line. They're in a very competitive setting every day.
There you go. That's what you want to hear, right? I'm not sure how long ago, and hopefully it's truthful information there from Billy Napier, but how long we could say that, whether it be Florida having a good defensive line and having to go against an offensive line that we know is not very good, or like maybe last year, Florida's offensive line, and we know that group being pretty good, going against a defensive line that we weren't really expecting much from. But now with these transfers on both sides and some depth built on both sides, now that this is a competition, not only within the offensive line room amongst themselves and the defensive line room amongst themselves, but now the offensive line and the defensive line, they're going against each other. And hopefully it is good on good right now. The ones for Florida's offensive line versus the ones for Florida's defensive line. Hopefully, you're creating some better competition right now that's going to help both of these position groups down the road. And, unfortunately, right now, Florida's getting the injury bug a bit on the offensive line. And, the major one being Micah Mazuka, and we'll get into that in just a second from Stapleton. But you got that one. He's going to be missing, of course, the rest of spring, and he's back in the fall. But the other ones Billy Napier mentioned there as well. But you still have some guys that I've been mentioning Jake Slaughter since before spring practice and how he's coming along as well. So that you hope that he continues to come along and probably be that piece. With center guard got some starting snaps at center in this scrimmage. So, it was a place where I've heard that he probably could push before spring practice, but, with Florida trying to figure some things out, and we'll get into it because some position versatility along the offensive line of where these guys would fit. But, besides Kingsley now, and you heard me earlier this week where Roger Kearney, the true freshman, is getting some snaps at center too. Well, it looks like Jake Slaughter getting some reps at center, getting some reps at guard. And look, that's what Florida's going to have to do. You heard him talk about the combinations. That's what they got to figure out now on this offensive line. Florida's starting 5 in the fall may not be practicing in scrimmage 1 together, spring scrimmage 1 together, and spring scrimmage 2, and the orange and blue game coming up on Thursday night. The starting 5 Florida takes to Utah may not be the starting 5 that we're discussing all through spring practice. So spring practice is for that. You figure out if some guys go down, you're not going to sit there and pressure guys to play through injury. So you're going to build some depth along the way. I still think the transfer portal is a very healthy option for Florida to hit. I know Florida brought in some transfers already along the offensive line. I'm thinking it's going to happen again. And now with some injuries too, may not be a bad thing. But I think if you can upgrade the offensive line again in the transfer portal, that's going to be a spot that I think Florida can do so. So it's still not going to surprise me one bit for Florida to go get another or 2 in the transfer portal along the offensive line. And now maybe blessing in disguise that these moves kind of already in the mind of the staff of going to go and hit the transfer portal, because now dealing with a whole bunch of injuries here on the offensive line. So yeah, inner working of the competition there along the offensive line, but I do like hearing that they now go against the defensive line that can raise the competition as well. So before we continue on with the offensive line, once again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, but we'll also go through a little bit more of what Billy Napier had to say. I'll go to the safety room a bit. And he said, quote, "It's a room that's doing a lot of work, mainly because of the youth." He fully admits the youth. And look, this is another position where Florida can go hit the transfer portal. He said, even in the presser, quote, "Maybe we'll add a player and develop depth here at that spot. We will be playing young players, and that's by necessity." the starters that we're talking about right now, Kamari Wilson, Miguel Mitchell, okay, they were true freshmen playing last year. They'll be true sophomores looking like your starters right now. Then, Sharif Denton and your Jordan Castell. I'm throwing nickel in there a bit too, but, specifically for the back safeties here, you're looking at Jordan Castell, Bryce Thornton, Aaron Gates. I mean, those are guys that you're throwing in the mix right now that are right now your second line behind Wilson and Mitchell. They are going to be young back there. And I do think Florida, absolutely, if there's a player out there worth it, and maybe just because you need some experience back there, go get an experienced safety in the transfer portal when the portal opens back up for the springtime. So, Napier mentioning just how young they are back there. No surprise to us, but also coming out and saying, look, yeah, this is going to be a place that we're probably going to hit in the transfer portal. Also talked about the tight end injuries as well. We discussed the offensive line injuries, of course, but Dante Xander's an AC sprain. Doesn't sound like it, but may be back for the orange and blue game there, and Odom might be back for fall there. So maybe not ready for fall right away there for Odom, but Napier saying he's doing the things he's supposed to do. But once again, it is Arlis Boardingham kind of leading the way so far through this spring at the tight end position, just being a weapon, unguardable at times, and then Hayden Hansen coming along as well as the second tight end right now, while Dante Xanders nurses his injury. So still some guys there to take over, with Zipperer now being out and probably for the year as well. Odom missing spring, and now Xanders as well. I mean, Florida went through this in last year with the tight ends, just the group getting hit with injuries in spring practice, and it's happening again this spring. But at the same time, we were coming into spring and we were just looking at players who could break through. And of course, not just me, but others out there, Arlis Boardingham's a name to watch. And that name to watch has been breaking through. So you still want the depth that we're discussing. And now it's like Florida's only going to be, if you're looking at the 3 for next Thursday's orange and blue game, if Xanders doesn't come back, Boardingham, Hansen, Tony Livingston, another name to look out for. So there's your 3 tight ends to be looking for on the field next week. So, all right, that will do it right now for the second scrimmage. And, if any more notes or anything come out, we'll be sure to hit on the next episode of Gators Breakdown or so. But let's transition to the offensive line. And we'll start with Darnell Stapleton and that left guard spot since Micah Mazuka's out.
We've had a couple guys that have stepped up since Mazuka's been out. The freshman has gotten some work there, Najee. Christian Williams has gotten reps there. We've moved different people in the spot. We always train these guys. We got to say position flexibility brings value, right? So if we teach you more than one thing, if something happens down the line and somebody happens to go down, it's next man up mentality. So you can't live by that if you don't practice that in the spring.
Is that positional flexibility concept easier to sell to those guys when there's this many spots open?
I wouldn't say it's easy to sell. It has to be something that they believe in as well, right? The better for the unit, the better for the team. But we got selfless individuals. That's what being an offensive lineman is. So if we had to move a tackle to guard, or guard to tackle, or center out to guard, they're willing to do that for the betterment of the team.
How's Najee performed? Just having to step up and maybe get some first-team reps with Mazuka out?
Najee's been doing a really good job, and I don't want to shout out the school he went to, but I think they did a really good job of developing him. The game is slowed down for him, which is the biggest thing for a high school guy coming to the college range, especially in the SEC, having the game slow down for them mentally and physically. And we're excited about him. He's excited to get the opportunity to show that he belongs, and we're just going to keep giving him more, keep pushing him. All right, it's about creating competition in that room.
Is he someone who can play center as well, or are you just kind of strictly a guard right now?
Oh no, he position flex. Right, he played center at IMG, did a really good job there. He moved out to guard at IMG, did really well there. Again, it'll help him in his career to be able to do both.
There we go. Najee Harris is a name. I spoke about it earlier this week, guys. As a name that, as a true freshman, not likely, that a true freshman come in and that he's ready. But Harris has been a name that really has gotten those first team reps, or some of the first team reps since Mazuka's been out, and has really taken advantage. Has really impressed his staff as a young freshman, and it's tough. We know how tough it is to come into this league. I mean, honestly, just college football in general, that's the hardest position to come in and be physically ready to go out there and go snap after snap compared to what you were doing in high school. And especially in this conference, especially in the SEC. I mean, these defensive linemen are no joke in this league. And if you're coming a true freshman and can come in, we've been hearing, he is getting first team reps and impressing and doing well. And earlier this episode, you just heard the kind of spiel of how well this defensive line is doing at the same time. And Najee Harris is coming as a true freshman and really fit in. And he's doing it at center and he's doing it at guard. I've been hearing mostly guard about where a lot of his success is coming from, but you heard the position versatility there. And you've heard that position versatility with a Jake Slaughter as well. As I was saying, he was getting some center snaps at the second scrimmage, and he's been playing guard as well. So, and it's really benefited for this group and for Florida. And not only just the versatility of center guard a bit, but guys being able to switch sides a bit. Sometimes it's not just as easy as, if he can play left guard, he can play right guard. A lot of times, sometimes that's not as easy, so being able to play both sides as well. And look, this is also where Florida's benefit of two offensive line coaches come in as well, as being able to spend time with these guys and, the teaching that goes along there between Sell and Stapleton. I think that's why you see this offensive line. And look, I'm expecting another jump from these guys as well. When we talk about the run game, you know what? I'll probably save that. We are going to talk about the run game a bit, but it's also on this offensive line to be a bit more consistent at the same time as it is these running backs. Really good jump last year. And this offensive line was a good offensive line last year. There's a step to be taken, and maybe so now because guys returning and you have some transfers coming in as well. And hey, Stapleton talked about these transfers, Keontae Goodwin, Damian George, and how vets like Richie Leonard, who we'll also hear from right here, are helping those guys adjust.
They're stepping up as well. Like, again, they're a little bit not behind, but they have some things to learn. Like Austin's year 2 in the system. Both of these guys are in their first 2 months of really being out there and executing it. So there's still some things that they have to kind of lock in from a mental standpoint to be out there and do it at the same level as Austin. But again, competition, is what we're trying to create in that room at both those positions so that we get the best of each player.
How much do you lean on a guy like Austin to try and help Keontae and Damian maybe take that step to, learning what they need to learn and then kind of really?
Well, we're going to ride Kingsley. We're going to ride Austin. We're going to ride Richie Leonard. Like, those are the guys that been here with us, played some snaps, quality snaps for us. They know what the standard expectation is. So we're going to rely on them because we know that pure accountability is dangerous, right? When your teammate checks you on the field, on the locker room, is different than when a coach check you, right?
It's kind of like I said earlier, I had older guys doing it for me. So it's only right because, we got a lot going on at practice. A coach might not always see you took a 12-inch step instead of a 6-inch step, but if I'm sitting there watching, I can correct them because I know this is how it should be done, so yeah.
What's the tone of that? Because I guess it could be misconstrued as he's coming down on me. How do you keep the tone as like, hey, I'm trying to help you versus this old head's coming down on you I'm coming for a spot?
It always should be more of a conversation than an argument. Talk to a guy, tell him, this is what you see, and usually we're all older guys that have played, so the younger guys will take what we're saying, pretty well. We don't really have any guys with attitude problems or anything like that who would take it in an offensive way. So yeah, it's a good room to be a part of.
And this might be the position group in the room where that experience of having year one really pay off. Florida could only lean on, and rightfully, and thankfully so, Osiris Torrance coming in and the offensive lineman being able to be around him and not, kind of pick his brain for experience. Well, now all these transfers, Goodwin, George, all these freshmen coming in as well. Yeah, now as you heard Stapleton say, now they can go to Austin Barber, they can go to Richie Leonard, they can go to Kingsley Walker and pick their brains about this offense. And now these players can also share it with these players just on their own, being away from the coaches. You need that leadership. You need that leadership on a football team, especially in the early stages. And also for Florida, just trying to build upon what they did last year and just become a better team, dig out of this hole that they've been in the last couple of years. And it's been the first time that we could rely on an offensive line like we could last year and feel good about an offensive line last year. We want that to continue. And I do think that there's a good nucleus of players here from Austin Barber, Richie Leonard, who played a lot last year. May not have started, but did play a lot last year. Kingsley to go along with these these transfers who have some SEC experience, so that they're not hitting the ground, so green as the true freshmen are. So now you get to just the sharing of information, everything not being so new. And I really think it probably helps this position group a bit more just because of the transfers out that Florida had. And now you're bringing some transfers in, some new faces in that you don't necessarily want to have to rely on. But if a Najee Harris and a Kearney can come in right away and prove it, it's going to be a lot because of how they were treated and how they were led by this experienced group here. So the player sharing of experience, I think, is pretty big going along here in this position versatility. One more, as Stapleton was discussing Damian George, he did say now, and we were wondering about this, and Rob Sale was pretty much making it sound like this was early on in spring, so things can change because Florida's had some injuries now. That Damian George made it sound like maybe he was just going to stay at tackle. But maybe in just emergency cases only. And we know he has the experience. He played both at Alabama. Damian George is playing some guard at Florida right now. He did say earlier this week that Damian George was lining up at guard. So that position versatility is still going to be there. And look, it could just be in case of emergency uses. You heard Billy Napier say, what they're dealing with up front right now. They're dealing with some injuries. They got a bunch of combinations up there right now. It should come as no surprise if you've got a guy coming in with experience, SEC experience, playing both positions, that Damian George is now playing both tackle and guard right now. So it's a benefit for Florida. If it comes along and say the thought is Goodwin and George fighting for that right tackle spot, and that could still be the case. It probably still is the case. Okay, but say it's beneficial for Florida to get their best five out there. Say Goodwin and George are not separating themselves all that much. Both are playing really well. All right, well, now you got the luxury of Goodwin playing right tackle and now George playing right guard. If it's that even and George doesn't bring you that big of a benefit over Goodwin, well, Goodwin now can play right tackle. George can play right guard. So that you need that position versatility if it's there. And if Goodwin can earn the job at right tackle, that affords you the time to play. We'll see what Mazuka, and that might play a role in this too. If he's back able to come in and play left guard, Richie Leonard's there at right guard. Maybe Goodwin's more of a backup there for George. So that's why I said there's still a lot to like about this offensive line. You look at the names and you can name some depth pieces here and where guys fit in. The Goodwin George battle, Jake Slaughter where he fits in, Najee Harris coming along as well. I mean, start going with your starting five. You start adding some names there. You can get the 7 or 8 pretty easy. Give us a couple more. There's a couple more right here, and I think you start feeling even better about this offensive line. But the position versatility, I think, really going to come into play with this Keontae Goodwin, Damian George, right tackle battle. If it doesn't work out for George there, I think you got a guy who can come in and play some guard. Well, we heard from him a bit and didn't get to hear from him a whole lot because, he was just kind of breaking through a bit last year. But here's Darnell Stapleton and Richie Leonard on Richie Leonard's growth and what they're looking for from him this year.
Richie, as I call him, yeah, that's my guy. Again, he's not what you're going to say prototypical, but from a standpoint of what he knows and how he goes out there and plays and his instincts, like he plays big. I'm going to put it that way, right? He might not be the biggest in stature, all right, but when he goes out there and plays, he knows exactly what to do, exactly how to do it, and he's effective. And that's what it comes down to. Can you get in front of your guy and block him?
Mentally, on the mental side of it, I feel like in my earlier years here, I wasn't ready to play. I might have been ready to play physically, but not mentally. So, trying to take that step forward and be a little bit more mature, especially heading into this year, trying to take over that starting role. So,
do you know that in the moment, or when you're a freshman, you think man, they're not giving me a chance. But now as an older guy, you think, okay, I wasn't mentally there. Or do you know that in the moment that you're not there, or something you reflect on now?
Yeah, absolutely. As an older guy looking back, it's like I wasn't ready. As a freshman, I was mad at everybody. Just immature still. But
Sure.
But looking back on it, I wasn't ready to play SEC football at the time.
What's it require to be patient?
Honestly,
It sounds like you weren't always.
Yeah, it's hard, coming in and being a young guy and not playing as much as you want to off rip, but seeing a lot of older guys that went through that same process I went to. When I got here my freshman year, I was looking at older guys like Brett Heggie and Stone Forsyth, and those guys did everything right. So seeing older guys like that wait their turn and just prepare and work hard while you're waiting your turn, seeing older guys like that really helped me out.
Yeah, it's not going to be the same for everybody. Richie Leonard did go on to say in his press conference, hey, look, somebody like Najee Harris, it's impressive how he can come in right away and do the things he's doing because I couldn't do that. I needed time, and I realize it now that I needed the time. I didn't realize it at the time, but I realize it now that I needed that time. I needed to grow, and now he's going to share his experience with a Najee Harris and a Roger Kearney. It doesn't come along often. And not only for offensive line, it's not just you. You got 4 other guys that are relying on you, a quarterback that's relying on you, a running back that's relying on you. It's not just, especially for the offensive line and that moniker 5 = 1. You're looking for a group that can play together. You might think it's just about you, but it's how you interact with the 4 other offensive linemen at the same time. So, there's some learning experience there for Richie Leonard, and I'm excited to see where he fits in. I mean, it's whether I assume he's going to earn a starting role, but that's what I'm saying. Florida's got some options at guard. Maybe he doesn't earn a starting role, or maybe kind of similar to what he did last year. He maybe starts or comes in and still plays a lot. Last year, I mean, Ethan White came off the field a bit, so they could put Richie Leonard in. And there were times he looked better than Ethan White. What does that mean for this year? As I said, you get Slaughter is coming along nicely. Harris is coming along nicely. Mazuka should be back. I mean, there's 4 guys right there that I think we're looking at guard right now. And we know we can count on Richie Leonard. We know we can. So at the bare minimum, you're getting what you got last year from him. Hopefully he's taking another step. But I'm excited to see where, a guy that you just haven't heard from a lot and just kind of steadies himself and builds himself to the program. Development. We don't have to see it day one. And I know we get caught up in that. And if we don't hear from a guy in year one, but offensive line, it's tough. It's really tough. And especially, in this league, sometimes development's needed. And you heard Stapleton say, look, it may not look the prettiest at times with a guy like Richie Leonard, but he does the things he's supposed to do, and he's successful by doing those things. So, all right, we'll keep it going. Just a couple more here, and Darnell Stapleton on the importance of Kingsley Walker.
Kingsley works at his craft. I think, talking about guys that care and it matters to them, he's one of those guys. So he's going to work at it, and then we're going to do some things to help him when it comes to, how we're snapping the ball and cadence and stuff like that. So that's on us as coaches as well to help put him in a situation where he's comfortable with that. But I fully expect that to not be an issue this year.
And that soundbite was on, you remember those penalties Kingsley had last year? And look, we'll be frank, we'll be truthful, inexcusable penalties. There for some of the false starts that he was having, and then I think some of the personal fouls there at times last year, toward late in the year as well. So here Jake Slaughter, you get some first team reps in the second scrimmage. Maybe there's a battle going on there. Maybe it's a push happening at the center position at the same time. So competition is not a bad thing. Or maybe it's just to see how Jake Slaughter will look in case Kingsley Walker goes down. So there's plenty of ways to look at Jake Slaughter getting a lot of first-team reps in the second scrimmage at the center spot. But, Kingsley came along pretty good 2 years ago, and we were looking for a step last year. And he was still played okay, but it was just some of those mental errors that he's got to get over, especially experienced as he is now. And you hope that he's passing his experience down. You don't want to see those inexcusable penalties, the lack of concentration penalties, especially at your center spot. The leader, one of your leaders of your offense, leader of that offensive line group. You want to see Kingsley come along right here. So, all right, we'll wrap it up right here. Richie Leonard on this running game and these running backs.
I hope it's just as well as last year, if not better. We've got a bunch of guys who love to put their hand in the ground and run the ball. That's our motto. Let's run the ball. So, yeah, it should be good.
How's Trevor and Montrell kind of taking the next step? And what do you think of Carroll, too, in the mix now?
Oh, yeah, Trevor and Montrell are, going into this next year 2 in this system. I guess year 3 for Montrell, but year 2 here at Florida, it's only going to get better for those guys once like I said, it's another year in the program, another year in the offense under their belt. So, yeah, and Cam Carroll is a dude. He's a dude, big physical back. I like blocking for him. He makes my job really easy.
What about Trayon Webb? What stands out about him? I know he's early rolling, but
he's got great vision. He's real patient. You usually don't see young running backs with that type of patience that Trayon Webb has, but he's impressed me a lot, too, this spring.
That's good to hear. We haven't heard a whole lot about Trayon Webb, of course, freshman coming in. 4th running back right now, but we've got a little spiel there. And look, we know what we're getting from ETN. We know what we're getting from Johnson. Those guys practice in, practice out, first 2 scrimmages as well, have done what you would have expected them to do. Cam Carroll comes in. We see the highlight last week. There's number 27. No, that's not Damian Pierce. That's Cam Carroll running over guys. He's going to be a weapon. And third downs for him, I'm telling you, he's going to be the running back you're going to be looking for on third down. One Cam Carroll. And then you hear from Trayon Webb the vision. I mean, you like hearing that about a true freshman running back coming in. He's got that type of vision. I'm not sure I've seen that type of vision from a true freshman before. Richie Leonard's basically saying there. I mean, this staff, they know how to recruit and develop running backs. They know how to recruit and develop offensive linemen. Just the tandem between offensive linemen and running backs under this staff, I don't think we're going to question it too much. I really don't. And it may, yes, I'm a stars matter guy, all that stuff. You know that. I'm not going to shy away from that. Yes, I think, better offensive line recruiting is needed. Running backs, I think they're doing a pretty good job at running back. Maybe elevate at some spots along the offensive line, but as far as development goes, and mostly as far as recruiting goes, I don't think we're gonna look back and question it all that much. We may question it in the moment, but given the reputation at Louisiana, given what we saw last year, and now you hope you build on that. You hope it's an experience that the running game's even more consistent. I love the big runs. Give me some more of those 5, 6, 7-yard runs. Become better pass catchers. Maybe that's better part of the offense as well with the quarterback change. Maybe Billy Napier inserts the running backs in the passing game a bit more. There's a couple of variables there about getting the running backs into the passing game a bit. Something I'd love to see. But Richie Leonard describing what he sees from true freshman Trayon Webb, it's exciting. And I think, that gives Florida a fourth back right there if something happens that it might can come in. Much like Trevor Etienne did last year as a true freshman and come in and make some plays. All right, there we go. Getting you caught up from the second scrimmage, hearing from Billy Napier, hearing from Darnell Stapleton, Richie Leonard along the offensive line, keeping the spring practice covers going for you Gator fans. But that would do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. That really, really helps us out right here on YouTube if you're catching the replay. Also, thank you very, very much. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining me on this episode of Gators Breakdown.